I never thought those words would actually come out of my mouth. But there they were, hanging in the air between us like a grenade with the pin pulled. Because I had no better option. The look on Silas's face when I said it. I'll probably remember that until the day I die. Not that I feel bad about it. He's the one who cornered me with the question in the first place. What was I supposed to do? Lie? My name is Corinne. I'm 33, and I guess this is the story of how my 6-year marriage imploded, leaving me staring at an eviction notice I can't afford to fix. It all started 3 weeks ago. We were having dinner. Nothing special, just takeout from that Thai place down the street he likes more than I do. The air in our apartment had felt thick for days. Silas had been quiet, withdrawn, moving through our shared space like a ghost with chores. I'd chalked it up to his usual moodiness, another one of his emotional tides I'd have to wait out. I was scrolling through my phone, half listening to him talk about some issue with a server at his IT job, when he suddenly went silent. I didn't look up immediately. Silence from Silas wasn't unusual. It was usually a prelude to some heavy sigh, some plea for attention. But this silence stretched. It became heavier, pulling at the air until I felt its weight on my shoulders. I finally lowered my phone. He had put his fork down. His pad CU, usually devoured, sat mostly untouched. He was looking at me, really looking at me, with an intensity that felt foreign. His eyes, normally a soft, accommodating hazel, were sharp and focused. It was like he was trying to solve a complex equation that had been staring him in the face for years. "Corinne," he said, his voice unnervingly steady. "Why did you marry me?" Just like that, no preamble, no gentle lead-in. It was so direct, so practiced, that I almost laughed. 6 years of shared bills, of family holidays, of him picking up my dry cleaning and me reminding him about his dental appointments, and now he wanted to know why. It felt absurd, like asking why the sky is blue after a lifetime of living under it. I could have given him the easy answer, the one he was so clearly fishing for. Because I loved you, duh. I could have manufactured a soft smile, reached across the table, and fed him the line he needed to hear. It would have been simple. The evening would have continued, the tension would have dissolved, and we would have gone to bed in our shared marital complacency. But something in me just snapped. Maybe it was the way he asked, like he already knew the answer and was just testing me, daring me to lie. Or maybe, after 6 years of carefully managing his feelings, of validating his insecurities, of being the emotional bedrock he so desperately needed, I was just tired. Tired of the performance. So I didn't give him the easy answer. I picked up my fork, took a deliberate bite of my green curry, and swallowed. I let the silence hang for another moment, just to watch the hope flicker in his eyes. Then I looked at him, not with malice, but with a flat, clinical honesty. "Because I had no better option at the time," I said. Then, as if commenting on the weather, I added, "You were stable. You had a decent job, and you were obsessed with me. It seemed practical." The word hung in the air between us. Practical. The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might actually pass out. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He looked like I'd just spoken to him in a language he'd never heard, one that reshaped the entire reality of his world. "Practical?" he finally whispered, the words sounding brittle and alien on his tongue. He looked down at his hands, then back at me. "So, you never loved me?" I rolled my eyes. I couldn't help it. This was exactly what I meant. The drama. The immediate leap to the most tragic conclusion. Does it matter now, Silas? We've been married for 6 years. What did you think was going to happen when you asked a question like that? That I'd gush about how you're my soulmate? Grow up. Looking back, maybe I could have softened the blow. But honestly, his constant need for validation was exhausting. It was a leaky faucet of insecurity that I was expected to patch up every single day. "Do you love me? Are you happy? Are we okay?" It was like, "Dude, I married you. Isn't that enough? Do we have to dissect our feelings every 5 minutes like a high school science project?" I didn't tell him that when he proposed, I had actually waited 3 days before saying yes because I was hoping my ex, the exciting but wildly unreliable one, would call. I didn't tell him that I'd spent the first 2 years of our marriage wondering if I'd made a colossal mistake, or that sometimes, when he touched me in the dark, I had to actively force myself not to pull away. Some truths you just keep to yourself. But that night, with his one direct question, it was like he was holding out his hand and asking for the knife. The worst part wasn't even what I said. It was how he reacted. There was no yelling, no storming out, no throwing his plate against the wall. He just sat there, nodding slowly, as if I'd finally confirmed a dark, lingering suspicion he'd held about himself all along. He looked relieved, in a horrifying way. Then he quietly got up, took his plate to the sink, rinsed it, and placed it in the dishwasher. He didn't look at me. He moved with a quiet, deliberate grace that was more unnerving than any outburst of anger would have been. He walked past me, his shoulder brushing the back of my chair, and went into the spare bedroom, closing the door gently behind him. No drama. And somehow, that felt infinitely worse. The next morning, he was gone before I woke up. I figured he'd left for work early to avoid me, a passive-aggressive move that was classic Silas. I sent him my usual text, "Pick up milk on the way home, we're out," acting as if nothing had happened. It was my way of extending an olive branch, of saying, "Your little tantrum is over, let's go back to normal." He didn't answer. That was the first red flag. Silas always answered, even if it was just a K. His phone was practically an extension of his hand. By evening, when he still wasn't home by 7, or 8, or 9, I started to worry. Not a concerned for his safety kind of worry, but a more selfish, logistical one. Who's going to take out the trash tomorrow? He finally walked in around 10, smelling faintly of whiskey and a bar I didn't recognize. He hardly ever drank. I was on the couch, scrolling through Instagram, and I made sure to keep scrolling, affecting an air of total indifference. "Where have you been?" I asked, my eyes still glued to a picture of my friend Jocelyn's perfect vacation in Cabo. "I texted you about the milk. I needed some time to think," he said. He was standing in the entryway, holding his briefcase like a shield. He looked like a guest in our apartment. "About what you said last night." I sighed, a long, exaggerated sound of exasperation, and finally put my phone down. "Are we seriously still on this? I was just being honest. Would you rather I lied?" "No," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm glad you were honest. It explains a lot." Something about the way he said it made my stomach drop. There was no hurt in his voice, no pleading. There was a chilling sense of clarity, of resolution. For the first time, a tiny sliver of fear pierced my annoyance. Maybe I'd pushed too far. "Whatever," I said, picking my phone back up to reclaim my power. "Just don't forget the trash needs to go out tomorrow." I could feel him staring at me, but I refused to look up. I double-tapped Jocelyn's photo, her and her husband grinning with sunset cocktails. I found myself wondering if she really loved him, or if she'd just settled too. Most people did, didn't they? Silas didn't say anything else. He just went to the bathroom, took a shower, and went back to the spare bedroom. That was the first night in our entire marriage that he didn't kiss me goodnight. Even when we were fighting, he always did. And despite everything I'd said, I lay awake for hours, listening to the unfamiliar silence from the other side of the wall. That silence was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, Silas transformed into someone I barely recognized. The needy, emotionally transparent man I had married was gone, replaced by a calm, detached stranger who happened to live in my apartment. He stopped asking how my day was. He stopped leaving little notes by the coffee machine. He stopped looking hurt when I forgot about the big work presentation he'd been stressing over for months, the one I'd promised to help him practice for. One evening, he was microwaving leftovers while I was on the phone with my mom. He spoke without looking at me. "I opened a separate checking account today." He announced it with the same emotional weight as if he were telling me about the weather. A strange flutter of panic went through me. "Why would you do that?" I asked after I'd hung up. He shrugged, his eyes on the spinning plate in the microwave. "Just seems practical." He threw my own word back at me, and it felt like a slap. My chest tightened, but instead of apologizing or backtracking, I doubled down. Pride, I suppose. Whatever. Just make sure the mortgage gets paid from somewhere. The changes kept coming. His phone, which used to be an open book, now had a passcode. When I demanded to know why, he said calmly, "Privacy is important in a healthy relationship, don't you think?" The hypocrisy was rich, coming from the guy who used to text me his location without me even asking, The more he pulled away, the more I found myself trying to provoke a reaction. Any reaction. I wanted the old Silas back, the one who would get upset, who would argue, who would at least feel something I could manage. I forgot to tell him about dinner plans with my family, then acted surprised when he was upset about sitting at home alone. I told you last week, I'd insist, knowing full well I hadn't. You never listen when I talk. The old Silas would have been flustered, apologetic. The new Silas just stared at me with those calm, all-seeing eyes and said, "If you say so, Corinne." That new, maddeningly calm voice. It was infuriating. It felt like trying to punch a ghost. The weekend it all truly fell apart. I came home from brunch with Jocelyn and our friends. I'd spent a solid hour complaining about Silas's new, bizarre personality, painting myself as the bewildered, long-suffering wife. They'd nodded sympathetically, which had bolstered my sense of victimhood. I walked into our bedroom to find him methodically packing a suitcase. Not a small overnight bag, but his large, hard-shell suitcase, the one we used for vacations. "What are you doing?" My voice came out higher than I intended. "Taking a break," he replied, not looking up from a stack of folded shirts. "My brother said I could stay with him for a while." That's when the panic, the real, ice-cold panic, set in. It wasn't the romantic, heart-wrenching panic of losing a soulmate. It was the raw, terrifying panic of a CEO realizing her company is about to go bankrupt. My mind raced, not with memories of our life together, but with a mental spreadsheet of my dependency. The apartment, which my salary alone couldn't possibly cover. The car payments, automatically deducted from our joint account. The excellent health insurance I had through his job. Even the stupid little things, like him killing the spiders and remembering to pay the internet bill on time. My life was built on the foundation of his stability, a foundation I had just casually dynamited. "You can't just leave," I said, trying to sound firm, but I could hear the desperate tremor in my voice. "We're married. You took vows." Silas finally stopped packing and looked up at me. The clarity in his eyes was terrifying. All the fog of neediness was gone, replaced by a hard, sharp focus. "So did you, Corinne. For better or for worse, remember? Not until someone better comes along." "That's not fair," I sputtered, feeling my cheeks flush. "I've been committed to this marriage." Have you?" he asked quietly, zipping the suitcase. It made a sound like a final, definitive judgment. "Because from where I'm standing, you've spent 6 years making it crystal clear that I was your backup plan. The safety net you settled for." "That's not what I meant," I backpedaled, my voice pleading now. "I was just being honest that night. Everyone settles in some way, don't they?" "No, Corinne," he said, the simplicity of his statement hitting me like a physical blow. "Not everyone. Some people actually love their partners." I switched tactics, desperation making me clumsy. "Look, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings, okay? But you can't throw away 6 years because of one comment I made when I was tired and irritated." "It wasn't one comment," he said, picking up the suitcase. "It was just the first time you were honest about how you really feel." He walked toward the door, and something inside me snapped. I couldn't let him leave. Not like this. Not when I wasn't prepared. I grabbed his arm, my fingers digging into his bicep. "Silas, please. I didn't mean it. I do love you. I was just, I don't know, trying to hurt you because I was angry about something else." It was a weak, pathetic lie, and we both knew it. He looked down at my hand on his arm, then back at my face, his eyes searching for something. Sincerity, probably? I tried to make my eyes well up with tears, a trick that had always worked before when I needed to end an argument quickly. "You know what's sad?" he said softly, his voice laced with a profound weariness. "I can't even tell when you're being genuine anymore." Then he gently but firmly removed my hand from his arm. He opened the front door and walked out, closing it quietly behind him. He didn't slam it. He just left. I stood there in the sudden silence of the apartment, the sound of the zipping suitcase still echoing in my ears. I wasn't heartbroken. I was ruined. The first few days were a blur of furious texting and strategic crying. I sent him demands to come home and talk about this like adults. He responded only once. "I need space to think. I'll contact you when I'm ready." By Monday morning, when I'd calmed down enough to think strategically, I realized I needed a plan. My first move was to check our joint bank accounts. My stomach lurched. He'd withdrawn exactly half of our savings. Not all of it. Not a penny more than his share. It was so precise, so calculated. It was clear this wasn't an impulsive decision. He'd been planning this. 2 silent, agonizing weeks passed. I deflected questions from friends and family with a web of lies. To my parents, Silas was swamped with a big project. To Jocelyn, we were going through a rough patch. It was exhausting keeping the facade up, especially when a coworker spotted him having lunch with some woman. They looked pretty friendly, she'd reported, watching my face for a reaction. I'd laughed it off as a networking meeting, while inside I was seething. How dare he move on when I was stuck in this limbo? Finally, desperation gnawed away the last of my pride. I sent him a carefully crafted text. We need to talk about our future. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I'm stunned. To my surprise, he agreed to meet at a coffee shop. Neutral territory. A battlefield of his choosing. I spent hours getting ready. I chose an outfit, a soft blue dress he'd once said he loved that was meant to remind him of our early dating days, of the woman he'd fallen in love with. I practiced my speech in the mirror. I would be vulnerable but dignified, understanding but firm. I would remind him of our history, our commitment, our vows. I would make him remember the good times, even if I had to invent some of them. When I saw him walk into the coffee shop, something lurched in my chest. He looked good, better than he had in months. He'd gotten a haircut. He was wearing a new jacket I didn't recognize. He seemed lighter, somehow, as if my presence had been a physical weight on his shoulders that was now lifted. Thanks for meeting, I said when he sat down, my voice smoother than I felt. I've missed you. Oh, what did you want to discuss, Corinne? He asked, not unkindly, but without returning the sentiment. He was all business. I took a deep breath and launched into my prepared speech. I talked about how all marriages have ups and downs, how we both needed to communicate better, how, despite everything, I had stayed committed because I took my vows seriously. I can't help feeling like you've just given up on us, I said, allowing my voice to tremble just slightly. While I've been here, still wearing my ring, still honoring our commitment regardless of my feelings. Because that's what marriage is, Silas. It's staying, even when it's hard. I reached for his hand across the table. To my relief, he didn't pull away. I know I said some hurtful things, and I'm sorry, I whispered, trying to inject every ounce of sincerity I could muster. I was just lashing out. You know I care about you. I studied his face, looking for a crack in his resolve. For a moment, I thought I had him. His expression softened, almost imperceptibly. Then he spoke. Corinne, he said quietly. Do you remember our anniversary dinner last year? The question threw me completely. Of course, I lied, frantically trying to recall which dinner he meant. You don't, he stated, not as an accusation but as a fact. Because you forgot. I made reservations at that Italian place you liked, and you made plans with Jocelyn instead. When I reminded you, you said anniversaries were commercialized nonsense and accused me of being needy. I started to object, but he held up a hand. The thing is, Corinne, that wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern. One I kept excusing because I thought if I just loved you enough, if I was patient enough, you'd eventually love me back the same way. My face was burning. That's not fair. I've shown love in my own way. Not everyone is all touchy-feely and verbal about it. Ender. It's not about being touchy-feely, he said, a tired sigh escaping his lips. It's about basic respect. Do you know what was on my phone that night at dinner when you answered my question? I shook my head, completely lost. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and slid it across the table. It was open to a recording app. A list of audio files, all dated, filled the screen. My blood ran cold. You've been recording me? I hissed, pushing the phone back at him as if it were contaminated. That's illegal. It's not illegal in this state to record conversations you're a part of, he said calmly, his voice as steady as a surgeon's. And I started doing it for my own sanity. Because you would say things, cruel things, and then later claim you never said them, or that I was being too sensitive. You were gaslighting me, and I honestly thought maybe I was losing my mind. Oh, so what? You've been building a case against me? My voice rose, drawing glances from a nearby table. That's sick, Silas. No, Corinne, he said, and his calm facade finally cracked, revealing the raw anger beneath. What's sick is telling your husband you only married him because you had no better option, then trying to manipulate him into staying when you realize your meal ticket might walk out the door. He leaned forward. I have recordings of you on the phone with Jocelyn, calling me pathetic for buying you flowers. I have texts where you made plans with Mike from your old office, yes. I know about Mike while telling me you were working late. I have evidence of you taking money from my wallet without asking, then making me believe I was going crazy when I noticed it was missing. Each word was a physical blow, not because he was wrong, but because he knew. All this time, I thought I was the clever one, managing him, managing the narrative. But he'd been watching, documenting, preparing. So what now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You're divorcing me? I haven't decided, he said, standing up. But I do know that I deserve better than being someone's backup plan. He put a $10 bill on the table for the coffees and walked away, leaving me alone in the wreckage. A month after Silas walked out, the papers arrived. A thick manila envelope delivered by a courier. Divorce papers. With them was a small, black USB drive. A note was attached, written in Silas's neat, precise handwriting. Evidence supporting the divorce petition. I suggest reviewing before contesting anything. Silas. My hands were shaking as I plugged the drive into my laptop. A single folder appeared on the screen, labeled simply, Evidence. I clicked on it. It was a meticulously organized archive of my failings as a wife and a person. Dozens of audio files, screenshots of texts, scans of financial records. I clicked on a random audio file. It was a recording of a phone call between me and Jocelyn. I heard myself laughing as I described Silas's attempts to be romantic as cringy and desperate. I listened, horrified, as I complained about how emotionally draining he was. I went through file after damning file. Me forgetting his birthday. Me making fun of his insecurities at a friend's barbecue. Me lying about where I was and who I was with. It was a portrait of myself I barely recognized, yet couldn't deny. This was me, when I thought no one was listening. Then I saw the video file. It was from our friend's New Year's party last winter. I was tipsy, holding court in the kitchen. I hadn't realized Silas was in the doorway behind me when someone asked if we were planning to have kids soon. God, no, I heard myself say with a loud, dismissive laugh. The sound was ugly, brittle. Can you imagine being tied to Silas forever? I'm still keeping my options open, you know? The camera, someone's phone probably, captured the moment the words hit him. It captured the absolute devastation that washed over his face, a brief, unguarded flicker of agony, before he carefully composed himself, turned, and walked away. I couldn't even remember saying it. It was just a casual, cruel remark, one of 1,000 I had probably made over the years. But there it was, irrefutable proof. When I finally stopped, I just sat there in the stunned silence of my living room, confronted by the overwhelming evidence of my own character. Had I really been this person? This callous, this manipulative, this mean? The divorce petition itself was fair, almost generous. He wasn't trying to ruin me. He was just trying to cleanly and efficiently disentangle our lives. He had even, as the papers stated, paid the rent on our apartment through the next month to give me time to figure out my next steps. It was another one of his practical, considerate gestures, and it felt more damning than any punishment. The reality was crushing. I couldn't afford our apartment on my salary. My credit was terrible because I'd always relied on his. Most of my friends were actually our friends, and judging by their recent silence, they had chosen his side. I tried calling him one last time, my voice stripped of all artifice. We should discuss this in person, I said when he finally answered. I think there are things we can work through. There's nothing to discuss, Corinne, he replied. His voice was devoid of anger or hurt. It was just empty. The terms are fair. Sign the papers. And if I don't? I challenged, a last pathetic grasp for control. Then I submit the evidence to the court and we do this the hard way. It will be more expensive for both of us, and far more embarrassing for you. No threats, no emotion, just facts. You'd really do that? After 6 years together? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, filled with a sad, final clarity. You know what I finally realized, Corinne? You never actually loved me. You loved what I provided. Stability, adoration, financial security. But you never loved me. And I deserve to be loved for who I am. I had no response to that, because it was the truth. I'll have my lawyer contact yours, he said, and then he hung up. The click of the disconnected line felt like a door slamming shut on my entire life. 6 months later, I'm living in a studio apartment across town that costs almost as much as our two-bedroom did. The walls are thin, and I can hear my neighbors fighting at night. I had to take a second job, waitressing on weekends, just to make rent. When I see our old friends, they are polite but distant. Their eyes hold a new awareness. They know. I ran into Silas last week at the grocery store. It was the first time I'd seen him since the divorce was finalized. He wasn't alone. There was a woman with him, pretty in an understated, natural way. She was laughing at something he'd said, and he was smiling back at her. He looked happy. Genuinely happy, in a calm, settled way I don't think I ever saw when he was with me. When he noticed me standing in the pasta aisle, he didn't scowl or try to escape. His smile faded slightly, but he just gave me a polite, neutral nod and gently steered his cart down a different aisle. The woman glanced at me curiously, then followed him without a word. I stood frozen, a box of penne in my hand, watching them go. Something twisted in my chest. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was the stark, bitter realization that he had moved on completely, while I was still stuck here, paying the price. That night, scrolling through dating apps in my tiny, lonely apartment, I matched with a guy named Grant. Good job in finance. Nice, easy smile. He seemed stable. During our first date, he mentioned his recent promotion and his new condo downtown. I heard myself asking all the right questions, laughing at all the right moments, carefully building his ego. It was like riding a bike. I caught my reflection in the restaurant window and saw the familiar calculation in my own eyes. "So," Grant said, pouring me another glass of wine, "tell me about your last relationship. Why did it end?" I considered my answer carefully. The truth? That I had treated a man who loved me like a convenience, like a safety net, until he finally grew a spine and saw me for who I really was? That I had been selfish and cruel and was now facing the consequences? "It just didn't work out," I said, summoning a practiced sad smile. "He changed toward the end. He became someone I didn't recognize." Grant nodded sympathetically and reached for my hand across the table. "His loss," he said earnestly. I smiled back, my mind already racing. I wondered how long his condo lease was, if his company's health insurance plan was any good, whether he would be easier to manage than Silas had been. Some people would say I haven't learned anything, that I'm just repeating the same destructive patterns, seeking security over genuine connection. They might be right, but here's the thing: I can't afford to make the same mistake twice. Not the mistake of settling for someone I don't love, but the mistake of letting them figure that out. The next time someone asks me why I'm with them, I'll have a better answer ready. I'll tell them exactly what they want to hear, and I'll make damn sure there are no recordings, because the truth is I still can't afford the rent alone.